these are all Biden trials. This is done as election interference. Everybody knows it. I'm here instead of being able to be in Pennsylvania and Georgia and lots of other places campaigning. What's going on right here should never be happening. It's a very, very sad day in America, I can tell you that.
Former President Donald Trump's hush money case launches opening statements today. David Pecker will be the first witness. Joining me now with the latest is The Hill's Mychael Schnell. Mychael, what do we expect?
Yeah, so we heard the opening statements today in that courtroom in Manhattan, and the first few questions to David Pecker. And essentially what we're going to hear in these beginning days of this trial is have the prosecutors lay out their case and then have Trump's team be able to cross-examine these witnesses. So first up was David Pecker, and they only got through a few questions because court today had to end early, A, because of the Passover holiday, and B, because of one of the alternate jurors had a dentist appointment. But essentially, David Pecker is a pretty central figure in this case. He was the CEO of AMI, the parent company of the Inquirer, which was part of that catch and kill effort for that story having to do with Donald Trump and porn stars. So we're seeing sort of where the prosecution is going with their argument, and we're seeing the beginning of this case. We'll see how the former president reacts, but really this criminal trial finally getting underway officially today.
So what happens if Trump gets convicted?
Yeah, well, logistically speaking, he can actually still run for president. Even if he was convicted, he is still able to remain on the ticket and continue running. Politically, it's also a question if that would really change anything. Look, Kevin, after those 4 indictments against the former president, we saw his poll numbers go up. Alvin Bragg's case was the first one out of the gate. That was the first indictment to hit him. And his poll numbers went up. His favorabilities went up. So, the big question is, would this hurt him politically if he were to be indicted? There was a real possibility it wouldn't, because in the eyes of many of his supporters, they see these as politicized prosecutions. They see this as a weaponized Justice Department going against the former president. What's really going to be the key question is how those independent voters swing and how they take a potential conviction of the former president, because as we're seeing, a number of these polls are neck and neck, Biden and Trump in some of those key swing states. It could come down to those moderate independent voters, and they could potentially be swayed by a potential conviction.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's a new poll out about RFK that's kind of surprising. What do we know?
Yeah, so essentially this is saying that RFK, it would actually hurt former President Trump's chances more than Biden, which is really interesting because we have seen Biden and really the DNC and the Biden campaign go really hard against RFK. I mean, just a few weeks ago, the DNC opened up a whole new team to go after these third-party candidates because a lot of Democrats have some panic flashbacks to Jill Stein in 2016 when her bid really shaved off some support from Hillary Clinton. A lot of folks say that bid was one of the main reasons why Hillary Clinton lost to former President Trump in 2016. So it's kind of fascinating that when you look at the polls and get into the crosstabs, Kevin, I know you love the crosstabs, that it's actually hurting Trump more than Biden. I'm now curious to see if we see the RNC and Trump's campaign sort of pick up the heat on RFK, because in the beginning we saw them sort of amplifying him and leaning into that campaign because the thought was that it would hurt Biden, maybe coming back to hurt him.
All right. Meanwhile, back up on Capitol Hill, the House is passing in foreign aid bills for Ukraine, Israel, the Indo-Pacific, TikTok ban included. I mean, the Senate's going to vote later this week. What's in the bills? Dive into the weeds.
Yeah, so these were 4 bills that were voted on separately in the House, but through a procedural gambit, they're actually being sent to the Senate as just one package. This includes roughly $60 billion for Ukraine, $17 billion for Israel, about $9.1 billion of humanitarian aid tucked inside that Israel bill, and then $8.12 billion for allies in the Indo-Pacific. And now those are the main foreign policy priorities. And then there was a 4th bill for other national security priorities. That's where we see that potential TikTok ban. Essentially, if it passes, which is widely expected to happen, it'll give ByteDance, the China-based parent company of TikTok, a year to divest from TikTok, or else it'll face a ban on all U.S. platforms in the U.S. So as you mentioned, the House had those rare votes over the weekend passing this quartet of bills. They're now going to go to the Senate as a package. The first procedural vote on that package is set for Tuesday afternoon. And once it gets to Biden's desk, he is expected to quickly sign it to get this aid moving overseas.
Republicans are infighting over Ukraine. And meanwhile, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is going after Senator J.D. Vance. Then you've got Senator Lindsey Graham attacking Vance on Fox News Sunday. What's with the rifts?
Yeah, isn't this fascinating? This is essentially how we're seeing foreign policy, the center of the foreign policy center change within the Republican Party. You've got someone like Mitch McConnell, who's a Reagan era Republican, believes in supporting allies, is a firm believer in NATO. And then you have the more MAGA America First Republicans ushered in by the former president who believe in more of this isolationist idea. You know, they weren't supportive of aid for Ukraine. That's where you're seeing J.D. Vance come in. So that's really been the center point of this Ukraine foreign policy debate up on Capitol Hill. As we saw both in the House and the Senate take place, it's more of those Reagan era Republicans versus these more America First isolationist Republicans, just essentially like a proxy war between the conservative and traditional Republican versus the MAGA Trump Republican. So it's sort of this proxy fight that we've been seeing within the Republican Party. This has definitely been one of the flashpoints, the conversation about Ukraine and foreign policy overall.
All right, meanwhile, you've got Speaker Johnson's threat to his job. Is Speaker Johnson going to have a job, or are the fringe people going to force him out?
I think he's gonna remain clutching the gavel, Kevin. Look, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene left Washington on Saturday, not triggering a vote on her motion to vacate resolution. Of course, it's the same mechanism that was used to ousted former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. The thought was that she filed it after government funding, that CR, as a warning to Mike Johnson not to put Ukraine aid on the floor. But obviously, Johnson went ahead and did just that, and she did not trigger a vote on that motion. Now, I'll note she's still dangling it, calling on Johnson to resign, saying that if he doesn't resign, she is going to trigger that motion. But there was a really big impediment to her plan in the past month, Kevin. That was former President Trump giving a vote of confidence to Speaker Johnson. Johnson went down to Mar-a-Lago, stood next to Trump. Trump said, "I stand with the Speaker." You know, it's thought that muddied MTG's plans going forward. But look, if Congresswoman Greene were to force a vote on her motion to vacate resolution, it's widely expected that Democrats would step in to protect Johnson. A number of them in the weeks leading up to the foreign policy vote had said that if Johnson put Ukraine on the floor, they would swoop in and protect it from a conservative coup. Obviously, Johnson successfully did that. So the expectation is that Democrats would back up their word and protect him from an ouster.
Columbia University moving classes online today after protesters on campus were targeting Jewish students. How has the White House reacted?
Yeah, this has been a really fascinating story that's been developing over the past 24 hours about the protests going on at Columbia. The White House has come out very strongly. There was one of the White House spokesmen, Deputy Press Secretary Andrew Bates. He said, quote, "While every American has the right to peaceful protest, calls for violence and physical intimidation targeting Jewish students in the Jewish community are blatantly anti-Semitic, unconscionable, and dangerous. They have absolutely no place on any college campus." So we're seeing the White House come out pretty hard against that right there. There was also a number of Jewish Democrats, lawmakers from the House who are at Columbia right now: Congressman Jared Moskowitz, Congressman Dan Goldman, Congresswoman Lois Frankel, Congressman Jared Moskowitz, who are walking through the campus as a show of support to Jewish Columbia students amid these protests. A developing situation at Columbia, but definitely has the eye of the White House.
The Supreme Court is hearing a case today on a case involving homeless people. Walk us through the arguments.
Yeah, so essentially what we have here is the Supreme Court today set to hear oral arguments over a challenge for a law that lets cities fine homeless people. And essentially what happened was the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that cities are not able to ticket homeless people for camping in public when there are no alternative shelters available. But the municipalities backing the lawsuit want that opinion overturned. The main argument here, Kevin, the city and town officials argue that the restrictions prevent them from implementing what's, quote, common sense laws against camping in certain public places. But homelessness advocates on the other side say that overturning this law would effectively criminalize homeless people existing. So a really fascinating case that we're going to see out playing out on the Supreme Court, something we will definitely be following.
Thanks, Mychael. Goodbye.
Thanks, Kevin.
Fallout continues after the Arizona Supreme Court's decision to enforce an 1864 abortion ban. Now, Arizona House Speaker Ben Toma is facing pressure from his side of the aisle to repeal the law, including from former President Donald Trump and former gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake. It comes after the GOP-controlled House blocked two separate efforts from Democrats to repeal the 160-year-old piece of legislation. It's not clear if Speaker Toma is going to bring a repeal to the floor. Toma defended the law in an amicus brief last year and is currently running for Congress in a crowded Republican primary. If the Civil War-era law is repealed, a 15-week abortion ban would retake effect. That ban was passed in 2022. The top Israeli intelligence official is stepping down over the failures surrounding the October 7th Hamas terror attack in Israel. He is the first senior official to resign following the attacks. His resignation comes more than 6 months after those attacks and could mean more resignations in the near future. 1,200 people were killed in those attacks and roughly 250 hostages were taken by Hamas. About 130 hostages are still being held. Melania Trump has launched a customizable necklace just in time for Mother's Day. The necklace, called Her Love and Gratitude, launched Sunday morning on the former First Lady's website. It features a flower pendant and an adjustable chain that can also be custom engraved. So I don't know anything about jewelry, but I'm curious. They now have the shoes and they have the necklaces, and it's going for the low price of $245. But that's not all. Those who purchase the necklace through her website can also receive a limited edition digital collectible that is minted through the blockchain. There is a cryptocurrency tied to the necklace. Seems like Melania is following her husband's footsteps after the former president recently marketed Trump shoes and Bibles. God bless. That's it for today's Daily Debrief. My name is Kevin Cirilli. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel and The Hills, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.